Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. My name is Omar Fritz Eriksson, and I am the Deputy Secretary General of IALA and also the Dean of the IALA Worldwide Academy. I would like to ask you all to mute your microphones and turn off your cameras as you have done throughout the event, unless you are speaking. And I give you the floor. Yeah, that's it, basically, in terms of logistics. So, Remy, could you please turn off your camera? So, before we go any further, I would like to announce that the IALA IGO process has just passed a very important milestone. For more than a decade now, IALA has been working on changing the status of the association from being an NGO to an IGO, an intergovernmental entity. Michael Bergman, please turn off your... You're very beautiful, but we don't want to see you now. And last year, a diplomatic conference hosted by our national member in Malaysia, where Director Nordin comes from, reached an agreement between 50 coastal states, the diplomatic conference, on the text of the Convention on the International Organization for Marine Aid Navigation, a new international convention. And in January this year, the government of France signed the convention as its depository, and it is now open for signature by all United Nations governments. Once we have 30 signatures and 30 ratifications in the respective parliaments, IALA will change its status from a non-governmental organization to an intergovernmental organization, an IGO. We look very much forward to this moment in time, which is in the future, maybe a couple of years from now. But we need the signatures of governments around the world. So please, if you meet your government somewhere, urge them to sign the new convention on the International Organization for Marine Aid Navigation. And there's a question or a comment from Captain Roger Barker. You raised your hand, Roger. Is it for real?
Sorry, Omar, I guess that was a mistake. My apologies, but well done to IALA and on the status. Good news. Cheers.
Excellent. Thank you. So having said that, I welcome you here today to this series of webinars delivered by IALA to a wider audience. So far, we have covered a number of interesting topics, and they have been well received. Also you, Virginia. Yeah, thank you. This webinar is the last in a series of 4, which will inform you about the most recent outcomes of the work of our technical committees, and specifically the ARM committee, the Aid Navigation Requirement and Management Committee. Our committees have a 4-year work cycle where they put a lot of effort into developing IALA publications such as standards, recommendations, and guidelines. And in the context of marine aid navigation, the IALA recommendations tell us what one should do when providing marine aid navigation services, and our guidelines tell us how to go about it, the best practice worldwide. Once the committees have developed a document, it is put up for approval by our council, and if council approves, then the document is published as an IALA document. So today we will be enlightened on 3 new guidelines. Guideline 1143 on unique identifiers for marine resources. Guideline 1154 on the use of mobile aid navigation. And Guideline 1155 on the development of a description of maritime services in the context of e-navigation. The first speaker today is Leanne Gordon, who is the modernization lead for nautical publications at the NGA in the United States. She has been attending IALA meetings for the past 5 years. Ms. Gordon sailed traditionally rigged tall ships for a number of years before joining the US government. And she enjoys very much being on and near the water. So, Leanne Gordon, the floor is yours with the first presentation, please.
Thank you, Omar. Can everyone see my screen, my presentation here?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. As Omar mentioned, this will cover IALA Guideline G1143, which is on unique identifiers for maritime resources, also commonly known as MRN, which is what it has developed into. We are currently, or the idea of MRN and of unique identifier for maritime resources came about from essentially a request from the IHO, which wanted IALA to take on the task of identifying a new way to number and name maritime resources, much as the international number had been used for list of lights entries for a number of years. And so there was a request that came in from the IHO to IALA for that. It was sent, and a work initially started in the ENAV committee and then was passed over to the ARM committee, although there has been a lot of collaboration between members of the two committees on the guidelines documents. And what resulted was a discussion primarily prompted by members of the Danish Maritime Authority, who proposed the idea of MRN, which is a subset of the Uniform Resource Name documentation, to be used and applied as a decentralized, harmonized way of naming maritime resources within the maritime context. And so the ENAV committee had petitioned IALA to acquire the MRN subset, which IALA subsequently did. And then G1143 was drafted. Version 1.0 was approved at Council 69 in June 2019, which outlines how MRN will be implemented in the IALA domain. And so at the end, I will show some examples of how MRN actually can be utilized as a naming convention and how the specifics of it go about. But the G1143 does outline how it will be used within IALA's remit for IALA member states and IALA interests. Subsequent to this, after let's go back, and there was some more input and some more work done at ARM committees to expand the document. And so at Council 71, G1143 edition 2.0 was approved. And this does include some enhancements. There was a significant expansion of the annexes, which outline the specific application of the MRN to different concepts within IALA, primarily as types. So right now, the MRN includes subtypes of ATON, aid to navigation, VTS, waterway, and pub. And publication was something that was added in version 2.0. There also had been some questions on the definition of uniqueness and how uniqueness could be applied within the MRN construct, and how users would ensure and implementers would ensure that an MRN that was being used was unique. So the definition of uniqueness was enhanced to try to add some clarification for that. There was also some information added on some syntax issues, such as the maximum length of an identifier and conversion from between GML and XML, as those are some of the common formats that are used for maritime resources. As I mentioned, we have a couple of examples here. So URN can be thought of in some ways as being similar to a web address. In fact, URLs are web addresses and they are subsets of URN. But there is a structure to this where everything starts with URN, and then the colon is used as a designator between different namespaces. So there's the MRN namespace, which follows URN. And then within that, IALA has a namespace. And as you can see in the first example, IALA's namespace is divided into types, one of which is ATON. And then there's a country code identifier, and then the number identifier that's used within the US in this example. Another example would be where an MRN is applied to a publication, such as G1143, where you have the URN, MRN, IALA as the organization ID, pub as the type namespace, and then the identifier G1143. And so these can be used in a decentralized manner where IALA sets up the precedent and then allows the national members to allocate them within their jurisdiction. So essentially, for the ATON example, once the country code of US is applied, everything after that is determined by the United States. Similarly, other organizations that work in the maritime domain, such as the IHO, the IMO, or other organizations, can apply to have an organizational ID at the level of IALA. And so you may see URN, MRN, IHO, and then other information as the IHO would deem useful. So this information can be applied across the entire maritime domain, not just the ATON or not just the IALA namespaces as were initially identified. So this really is a very flexible, very global way of naming maritime resources that can be applied in a number of different contexts. And of course, the work is never done. There are some upcoming developments with MRN. We are currently in the ARM committee working on a guidance document for applying for an organizational ID. As I mentioned, other organizations such as IHO, IMO, or anyone else, provided that they're in the maritime domain and that they adhere to the regular syntax and structure rules, could be granted this so that we can have widespread application of it and harmonization between the applications. And we're also working on a document that would provide information on the country codes and how those are to be used for MRN implementation. So those documents are in work now. We'll be continuing them at the next ARM committee, but we do hope to have some more formal versions of those sent up to council and sent up for approval very soon. So thank you everyone for your attention. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk about this, and I'd be happy to field any questions.
Excellent, Leanne, thank you very much. And I know that you will not be able to stay with us the rest of the day, so therefore, if there are any questions, we would allow them now. Are there any questions on the subject of MRNs or any related subjects? You can raise your hand, or you can write in the chat. I have not seen anything in the chat. And there is a hand, the first hand, Andrew Sedler, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I feel we ought at least to show appreciation by asking some sort of a question. What is the sort of timescale anticipated for this whole lot to be rolled out in any sort of global sense, or are we really pushing it out to see how quickly it gets taken up?
Leanne?
Thank you for that question. If anyone didn't hear it, the question was what the time frame for the rollout of MRN would be. And some of the things that we're currently working on in the committee, such as the implementation of the country code and how users would actually apply for or be assigned the MRN, haven't yet been identified. So we are still working through some of the details to make sure that it is a smooth rollout. Unfortunately, I don't think we have a time frame, but we are getting very close and hope to have at least one of the future documents ready at the next ARM committee, either this spring or hope potentially in the fall. And after that, I believe it would be ready for countries to start, formulating their plans and making plans to actually implement. So I would say hopefully within the next year, but that might still be a bit optimistic.
Bravely answered, thank you.
I would like to add to that we have some experimental use of it. It's already in use in some projects and initiatives. There's another question. How many namespaces have been registered already besides the namespace IALA? First you, Leanne, with your knowledge, and then we will move over to Minsu, who can help us with that.
Well, thank you.
I give the word to Leanne. You have to control yourself, Minsu.
Sorry.
Well, I would defer to Minsu, as he has been the one in charge of administering this.
Okay, over to you, Minsu.
Well, if I may, can I share my screen if that is okay for you?
Yeah. Please do.
Okay. Oh, I think I had a question to Leanne, how to get the namespaces, and maybe I can explain this with showing my screen.
We're holding our breath.
Just bear with me for a second. So this is the IALA website where you can find the MRN information. So if you go to technical, and you can go to data modeling, and there is a small tag MRN. And here you can find some basic information about MRN. So what is MRN, and application process and management of MRN, and who is using this. And these are the list of organization IDs which are published at the moment. So now we have around nine namespaces are published. So my question was how to get this. So please go here, and then you can send the email to the secretariat. There is an application process, and then you can follow this, and then you can send the email to this email address. Thank you.
Which happens to be Minsu. Thank you, Minsu, for that. And just this morning we were talking about moving the MRN information to give it its own space, slightly better or easier to get to location on the website. So it may change a little bit, but hopefully to the better. Andrew, you have still your hand up. Is that a new hand or a new question?
No, perhaps I should try and knock it down, or somebody can.
Okay, thank you. Well, we can't take the hands away. Actually, we can mute the participants, but we cannot unmute them. I don't think we can take. Oh, maybe we can. Well, anyway, let's move on. Unless there are more questions for Leanne. I don't see any more questions, so we will carry on. There will be opportunity for questions after all the presentations have been delivered as well, and we will also stay behind after we've closed the seminar if there are questions. If you don't want to be on the record in the recording with your question. So the next speaker is Trevor Harris, who is navigation manager at Trinity House in the United Kingdom. Trevor heads up the team dealing with the regulatory side of the provision of Eastern navigation around England and Wales. He has been at Trinity House for 8 years and in his role for 4 years, his current role. He has attended the ARM committee since 2017 and was the task group leader for the final stages of the work on what is now Guideline 1154 on the use of mobile aids to navigation. Prior to joining Trinity House, he was at sea for 33 years, primarily sailing on tankers and laterally ro-ro vessels out of the UK. And by the sound of it, he also likes to be near or on the water. So Trevor, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Omar. Just share my screen. So.
Yep, it's showing.
Good. Yeah, afternoon, everybody from England, and thanks for joining us. As I say, we're here to talk about G1154, the use of mobile aids on. This is a document that Working Group 1 of the ARM committee have been working on for numerous sessions now, and liaising with other IALA committees as well as other members of the group. Working Group 2 is where Leanne and Peter sit normally, and Working Group 3 deals with the risk. But Working Group 1, we deal with the navigational requirements, and this is one of the documents that we are working on or have been working on recently. The G1154's completely new guideline was developed to assist members in implementing the recommendation, which is R1016. R1016 was published in 2017, and it forms with other guidelines around the necessity for marking anything mobile, wrecks, that sort of debris and other practical issues around floating stuff. The definition of the mobile ATOM was quite an interesting topic to work on for us all, to get the definitions quite correct. And so it's defined. One of the big issues we did identify whilst working on the document was there could be conflicts with parts of the COLREG, so we made the definition as quite defined that these mobile ATOM cannot be used for things unmanned vessels as it states within the guide and everything. So that was a big topic for us to overcome throughout all our sessions. The other issues we thought of is when we get onto the requirements and what type of things this could be used for, where could there be other conflicts with the COLREGs that needed to be addressed. And from our definition, we thought we overcome that quite well. The typical uses, this was a list of some of the things we within the committee considered that may be appropriate to use mobile ATOM as risk mitigation. The thing is, mobile ATOM are a whole new concept. It is something people are going to have to get used to working with, and we're going to have to learn from each other as we move forward on the uses in that. The list that's within the guideline and within the recommendation is not all encompassing. You all may find other uses for it. You may think, why do we need it for these practical solutions? And from that point of view, the list is just a guideline in that now for what type of things we think this could be used for. Strange enough, just recently, within my own jurisdiction, we had an inquiry about somebody wanted to know what sort of light they could put on a swimmer going from England to France across the Channel. So that was the first chance I'd had of highlighting this document to other organisations. So it's the thing we've thought of within the documentation. Primarily, one of the concerns was marking debris, floating wreckage, containers, oil slicks, other types of things. The picture on the top right is one of the solutions we tried to come up with years ago within our own area, where we were tying an emergency wreck marking buoy onto an upturned hull. And that's the sort of thing now we're thinking of mobile ATOM could be used for that physically, or as we'll see later, virtually in that. So, and it's also when dealing with debris, containers, oil slicks, one of the things we were thinking about with the mobile ATOM was putting a physical object somewhere where it's sort of not so safe, where we could be sending ships as well. So that was another thing around the mobile ATOM, was we could deploy a physical aid to navigation in areas where we couldn't, or may not necessarily have to be able to get with a vessel and things like that. So these were the type of things within our thinking. within the guideline as well, we have mentioned modes of deployment in different types of methods. But when you're dealing with RECs, we also have to consider the other 3 IALA documents that have come out recently over recent years, and that's the ones on marking RECs, R1016 on the mobile ATOM, and also G1046, which was the response plan for marking RECs. These can all be documents which should be considered alongside G1154. The physical buoy characteristics we came up with, this was a long discussion, and it was even going on right to the end of the document when we were finalising it for everybody involved. And in the end, we went for the very simple, we'll use a special mark. There's a buoy that everybody has access to. It didn't require any additional buoys to be considered, and other sort of physical equipment and infrastructure. It's something which most people have the access to. And so from that point of view, we went, yeah, we'll stick with a normal special mark. We haven't stipulated, within the guideline, we haven't stipulated sizes and other things, because the deployment methods will be dependent on the scenario these mobile ATOM are going to be deployed in. Within the bit on additional marks, it mentions, and again, this will come up with other guidelines that are there. When you deploy a mobile ATOM, you can physically mark the ATOM as you see fit with pictograms, so it can be obvious from the air, as stated within the guideline on this page here. The whole thing with the physical buoys and within the mobile ATOM is whatever is deployed will be promulgated correctly with correct maritime safety information, and that is highlighted throughout the guideline, that whatever we deploy, whether it's physical, virtual, and how that buoy is going to, or mobile ATOM is going to appear to the mariner, should be promulgated fully as well, and not just relied on. Because as you'll see in my next slide, with the light characteristic that has been developed for this was developed over a couple of years, and it is something new for the mariner. The mariner will not be used to seeing this, and it is something we, as organisations, will have to promulgate, whether it's through training or using this at earlier stages. So the mariner is aware that something new is out there. Apologies for the sound, it's in the background of this, but my video editing skills aren't that good. I stole this video. If you want to see the full one, Geraldine's has put a video up on YouTube from the actual meeting this came from at ARM 9, and that explains the flicker and then the square flash scenario. When the light characteristic was being developed, that was developed through other members of the ARM committee and also members that sit on the ENG committee. And there were trials done in the real world with people of all age groups viewing the actual light characteristic over a couple of miles. And the new characteristic is the best one we could come up with, which was easily identifiable to everybody. This stood out no matter what age. And people's eyesight, as we know, as we get older, sort of in our reliance on glasses becomes more prevalent, and that characteristic was easily identifiable to everybody. With the AIS and virtual characteristics, as we know, technology moves on, so we are having to consider these as well. The guidance is there for when or if physical maton are not practicable as well. So the AIS and the virtual can be used to supplement physical maton or instead of the physical maton. And again, within this guideline, we have referred to other IALA guidelines and recommendations as well. Ones like A126, G0126 on all the AIS guidelines. So from that point of view, this is something which is still being worked on. With the AIS maton, is actually requiring an ITU document, which is currently being worked on to have some changes put in. So maton becomes an official AIS unit and has its own coding. That's currently being worked on at the moment. And I know IALA are in contact with ITU on that document. So in summary, I'd like to sort of say the guideline has been hard to sort of get right. It is a living document, and as we know, technology changes, our requirements will change. So the guideline is there for people to use, people to comment on, and within everything within the ARM committee and within, I'd say, all the IALA committees, and that if people have experience of this, they'd like to feed back in, please feed it back in through our committees, and we will consider this for future editions. So that's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. And question is, does anybody have any questions about G1154? I see no question, no hands, nothing in the chat. So think about it. There was one hand. Let me see. And this hand is from, who is this? Simon Milliard. Simon.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Trevor, for interesting. Are you aware of any, to my knowledge, it is not possible to go and buy a mobile ATON with this fresh character, or indeed how to secure it to a piece of wreckage or something. Are you aware of any developments on that front, Trevor, at all?
On regard to the physically going out and being able to purchase lanterns with that characteristic, no, I can't say I am aware of any developments. I know some of the industrial members are aware of the characteristics, and within the ARM committee there were industrial members involved in the trials. So I would hope, and I'd like to think, that they are developing lanterns which will be able to display that signal fairly shortly in that, but at the moment I have no proof that there is anything available just yet.
Okay, thank you. It's quite interesting because we've got a guideline, but not a practical way to deliver it. But obviously it's brand new, and this will promote that, and it'll be interesting to see people's experience as they develop systems for this. That'll be pretty welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you very much, Trevor. Then there is a note from Guttorm Tomren in Norway in the chat about the URN assigned at the front page, and the meaning of that is that as Leanne mentioned, we have a namespace called IALA and Pub for publications, and all IALA publications have been assigned a URN or MRN more correctly, and it will be on the front page of all of these documents. We're compiling or running through all the documents now, updating and putting an MRN on them, so they will have a unique identifier as a maritime resource, basically, from now on, basically. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Guttorm. So, moving on to the next and last presentation of today, which will be delivered by Peter Huymans, who works at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Waterways in the Netherlands. And he has been involved in this work in IALA and development of e-navigation since 2008, where he has been actively contributing to a number of IALA working groups and committees. Peter will speak on Guideline 1155 on the development of a description of maritime services or service in the context of e-navigation. Very interesting topic. So Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Omar. I'll share my screen to move to the presentation, and I hope everybody can see my screen and hear me correctly.
Loud and clear and very visual.
Ah, nice. Yes, this presentation is about the Guideline 1155, and during these 15 minutes, I'm going to talk you through some of the context information about the guideline, the template, which is a part of this guideline, and I can answer some questions. But first, what was the necessity for G1155? Well, we identified there was a gap between the maritime service descriptions and the required information for the development, like in documents like the G1128. And we noticed we missed stuff like a detailed description of the business process. We needed more information, let's say in the form of an information analysis. We needed more detailed use cases from a service description and more detailed requirements. And during the discussion over the last year, we concluded that, well, it could be that 1155 is a sort of intermediate guideline, as maritime services, the description of maritime services will evolve, and hopefully they will evolve to the level which is needed to develop these maritime services from a technical point of view. So, and this is, I think this picture states it very clear where we should place the guideline with the maritime service description. We have the maritime services, and we have, let's say that's the business perspective of things. And we have a technical perspective in which we have G1128, which contains guidelines on how to set up how to make a service specification and a technical design. And we have G1114, which specifies the CCSA, and we have also some proprietary or supportive services which are needed to build maritime services. So, and in turn, there are all these to build a maritime service. We also build upon product specifications, which we need to make some technical which we need to realize the technical services. So it's all interconnected, and let's say the right part of the screen we covered that last year in the e-navigation committee, but we noticed this bridge between maritime services and the technical and how we should transform that into a technical service. We were missing some piece of information there, and that was the main idea, to come up with some more guidance. And well, as you might have noticed, the G1155 is a very light guideline. It's a very compact with some context information, but it's mainly well pointed. It's mainly pointing to the use of the maritime service description template, and the template is designed to provide all the information for the G1128 and G1114 documents, and it makes sure that there is a good handover from business to IT. So from so that the technical guys know what they have to design and build. So let's look at this this template. Which information does it all contain? Well, it gives you some guidance on how to analyze information needs. So it gives you some guidance on how to do an information analysis, so that all the information needs for the maritime service, how they can be gathered, and it also gives you some guidance on how to describe features of the service. Let's say features, as features you have to think of like some sort of user stories, but then on a higher level. It also has space for functional and non-functional requirements, because these functional, non-functional requirements, you have to state them very clearly and make them unique, so there is some sort of traceability from the maritime service right through the realization, and that in every development step you can see or check that the functional and non-functional requirements are met. And it also has a good portion in it to help you set up a business process model, because, well, you need to standardize before you can automate. You need to have, you need to state a clear business working process, which then can be further developed by technicians and data modelers into a digital service. So, and that in short is all there is to it. So it's a very short story, but it's a very compact guideline.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
The art of explaining very, very complicated matters in a very, very simple and short, concise way. Well done.
That's what I'm paid for.
Yeah. Well done. Are there any questions for Peter? Okay. I see no questions. That give you a chance to, if you want to write something in the chat or raise a hand. Okay. Well, basically that's it then, if you have no questions. But as I said in the beginning, I think we will close the webinar shortly, and then we will stay behind, a few of us. If you have some questions or just questions to IALA or to the Secretariat, we're here to answer anything. I'm very encouraged by the number of participants in this meeting. We had something around, yeah, thank you, Peter. We had something around 70 some participants, which is quite good, and thank you for that. So this was the last webinar in a series of 4, which presented the work of the committees, basically, the outcomes of the committees that had now been turned into publications that were on the street and ready to use by members and the world. We will certainly continue this initiative, and our council meets twice a year, and the next meeting is in June this year, and shortly after that we will have another session. I don't know if it will be 4 sessions or how many it will be. It depends on the number of documents and what type of documents, etc. We'll try to bundle them in a clever way, and you will be able to find information about these webinars on the IALA website and in other IALA communication channels. We try to publish preliminary information about these webinars maybe a few weeks before, and then in the week or a week before we will push them heavily on our channels. Incidentally, there are other series of webinars and presentations of various kinds going on in IALA, and the next one is aimed at French-speaking Africa. It will happen on Tuesday next week, the 23rd of March at I think it's 1400 UTC. It will be in French, of course, and it will focus on risk assessment. We will try to enlighten that part of the world on the obligation to actually conduct risk assessments according to SOLAS, and then the tools that IALA has developed to enable our members to do that. The next regularly webinar in English, I think, will be on May 6th. It will be the Worldwide Academy, which has a series on VTS, vessel traffic services, and we will try to shed some light on guidance and examples of implementation, or the early phases of VTS where you want to implement a VTS. May 6th on a Thursday, and as a general principle, we will try to have our webinars on Thursdays every other week or so, but we will of course publish the program as such. So with that, unless there are questions coming up, I would like to thank the presenters again for your excellent contribution. Without your contribution, there would be no webinar at all. And thank the committee participants for producing these outcomes and putting a lot of effort into agreeing on these concepts and principles and practical guidance that we publish. I hope that you have found the information provided interesting and useful, and hope that all of you and your loved ones can steer clear of COVID-19 and all that. Keep your distance and keep well. So with that, I will close the webinar, and we will stay behind for questions as needed. The webinar is officially closed. Could we have the closing screen if we have one? Thank you. So